What if I told you that one of the greatest cities in the world burned to the ground and came back stronger, taller, and more ambitious than ever? What if a single cow, or maybe a comet, changed the fate of a city of 300,000 people in just 2 days? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago, a city built on ambition, rebuilt from ash, and obsessed with going higher, wider, and more spectacular than anywhere else on Earth. Stick with me, because every single landmark we visit today has a story that will genuinely surprise you. Some of these facts are so strange, so wild, and so specific that I had to double-check them 3 times. Let's go. Before we can talk about any landmark, we have to talk about the night that erased nearly everything. October 8th, 1871. A Sunday evening, dry and windy after a brutal summer drought. A fire starts in a barn on the city's west side. Nobody is quite sure how. The famous story blames Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a lantern, but that was likely invented by a newspaper reporter named Michael Ahern, who later admitted he made it up. Another theory, first seriously discussed in 2004 at an aerospace conference, suggests a fragment of Biela's comet, which had broken apart in 1845, may have triggered a cluster of fires that night, not just in Chicago, but across the entire Midwest simultaneously. Here's what we know for certain. Chicago's fire department had just 185 firefighters and 17 horse-drawn steam pumpers to protect an entire city. And crucially, the fire watchman on duty sent the responding crews to the wrong location. A clerical error that gave the blaze a head start. It never surrendered. By the time it was over, 2 days later, the fire had killed approximately 300 people, destroyed 17,000 structures across 3 square miles, and left over 100,000 residents homeless. The city's waterworks caught fire too, which meant the pumps ran dry and firefighters had nothing left to fight with. The city was left in ruins. But here's what happened next. And this is the part that defines Chicago. The first load of lumber for rebuilding arrived the same day the last building stopped burning. Chicago didn't mourn. It built. Within 2 decades, it would host the greatest World's Fair in history, give birth to the Skyscraper, and create a skyline that the entire world would recognize. The Great Chicago Fire didn't kill the city. It created it. The Art Institute of Chicago. Lions, legends, and a parliament of religions. Standing at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Adams Street, flanked by 2 enormous bronze lions, is one of the most important art museums in the world. The Art Institute of Chicago holds nearly 300,000 works of art, including Georges Seurat's A Sunday on La Grande Jatte, Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, Grant Wood's American Gothic, and Pablo Picasso's The Old Guitarist. It is the second largest art museum in the United States, after the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. But the building itself has a remarkable story. It was constructed in 1893 specifically for the World's Columbian Exposition, Chicago's legendary World's Fair, and it was the only major fair building constructed outside Jackson Park. While the rest of the White City was demolished when the fair ended, the Art Institute survived. Now, those lions. Sculpted by Edward Keymes, installed in May 1894, they weigh over 2 tons each. Keymes, a self-taught sculptor who literally taught himself anatomy by dissecting animals he hunted in the American West, gave the lions distinct personalities. The South Lion stands in an attitude of defiance. The North Lion is on the prowl, with a slightly open mouth and eyes gazing into the distance. They have become the unofficial mascots of the city. Every time a Chicago sports team makes it to a championship, the Bears, the Bulls, the Black Hawks, the Cubs, The lions get dressed in helmets and jerseys. Every Christmas, they get festive wreaths around their necks. The institution itself traces back even further, to 1866, when a group of 35 artists founded the Chicago Academy of Design on Dearborn Street. The Great Chicago Fire destroyed that building in 1871. They rebuilt. Of course they did. This is Chicago. Navy Pier. From warships to Ferris wheels. Jutting nearly half a mile out into Lake Michigan, Navy Pier is today one of the most visited attractions in the entire Midwest, drawing more than 9 million visitors every year. But it did not start as an entertainment destination. Not even close. The pier was built in 1916, originally called Municipal Pier, as part of architect Daniel Burnham's grand master plan for Chicago. The idea was both commercial and recreational, a facility that could handle freight ships and give ordinary Chicagoans access to the lake that was literally at their doorstep. When World War I broke out, the pier was converted into a Navy training base. It was renamed Navy Pier in 1927 as a tribute to those sailors. Then, in World War II, something even more extraordinary happened. The Navy modified 2 ships moored at the pier into makeshift aircraft carriers, landlocked aircraft carriers on Lake Michigan, and used them to qualify 18,000 Navy pilots in just 3 years. These pilots never saw the ocean. They trained on a freshwater lake in the middle of the country. In the 1960s, the pier had a brief renaissance as Chicago was identified as the greatest inland port in the world, with more than 250 foreign vessels docking there in a single season. But it faded again. By the 1970s, the pier was essentially abandoned, decaying, crumbling, nearly forgotten. Then came the $150 million renovation of 1995, and Navy Pier was reborn. Today, it has a Ferris wheel nearly 200 feet tall, paying homage to the original Ferris wheel that debuted at Chicago's 1893 World's Fair, along with restaurants, theaters, museums, and a lakefront park that is genuinely spectacular at night. More than 180 million people have visited since it reopened in 1995. That's more than half the population of the United States. The Bean. The sculpture that Chicago almost hated. In 1999, the city of Chicago launched a design competition for a major public sculpture to anchor a brand new park. Officials narrowed the field to 2 finalists. An American artist named Jeff Koons, who proposed a 150-foot glass and steel slide raised 90 feet in the air with an observation deck at the top, and a British Indian sculptor named Anish Kapoor, who proposed something far stranger. Kapoor's design looked like a giant drop of liquid mercury, an enormous, seamless, mirror-polished bean shape that would reflect the sky, the city, and every person who walked toward it. It had no flat sides, no hard angles, and absolutely no visible seams. The committee chose Kapoor. Then the engineers weighed in, and several said flatly, "This cannot be built." The idea of welding together 168 stainless steel plates into a seamless, perfectly polished surface with no visible joints was considered by some to be physically impossible. It wasn't impossible, but it was very hard. Construction began. The budget swelled. When Millennium Park finally opened in July 2004, already 4 years behind schedule and over budget, rising from $150 million to $475 million, the bean was unveiled to the public, but it wasn't finished. You could still see the welding seams between the plates. Kapoor was reportedly furious. He hadn't wanted anyone to see it until it was perfect. A tent, went back up. Workers polished through the winter. And on May 15, 2006, Cloudgate, its official name, was formally dedicated in its final form. The public, which had been skeptical, fell in love with it instantly. The sculpture is 66 feet long, 42 feet wide, and 33 feet tall. It weighs 110 tons. About 80% of its surface reflects the sky, and it bends that reflection downward in a gate shape, which is why Kapoor called it Cloud Gate. Underneath, a 12-foot arch creates what Kapoor called the omphalos, the navel, where visitors can look straight up into a disorienting kaleidoscope of themselves and the Chicago skyline, multiplied and curved in every direction. Cleaners wipe it down twice a day. The bottom 6 feet, where the fingerprints are worst, gets wiped up to 7 times a day. Twice a year, the entire surface gets a full polish with 40 gallons of liquid detergent. The land underneath Cloud Gate? It's actually a parking garage. And railroad tracks. Millennium Park sits on one of the largest green roofs in the world, built over underground infrastructure. Today, it is one of the most photographed public artworks anywhere on Earth. In 2015, a remarkably similar sculpture appeared at an oil field in Karamai, China. Kapoor called it a knockoff. The mayor of Chicago said he was flattered. The bean, meanwhile, just kept being polished. Willis Tower, the building that refused to stop climbing. In 1969, the Sears, Roebuck and Company was the largest retailer in the world. It employed approximately 350,000 people. And its chairman, Gordon Metcalf, said something that could only come from Chicago. Being the largest retailer in the world, we thought we should have the largest headquarters in the world. Architects Bruce Graham and structural engineer Fazlur Rahman Khan, later nicknamed the Einstein of structural engineering, of the firm Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, were handed the task. They needed to solve a problem that had never been solved before at this scale. How do you build a building so tall that conventional steel frames can't handle the wind? Khan invented the answer: the bundled tube system. Imagine 9 square steel tubes arranged in a 3x3 grid, welded together like a bundle of straws. Each tube supports the others. And crucially, by varying the heights of those individual tubes, some cutting off at the 50th floor, some at the 66th, some at the 90th, the building actually disrupts the air currents that create wind pressure. The building fights the wind with its own shape. Ground broke in 1970. They used enough concrete and construction to build an 8-lane highway, 5 miles long. In May 1973, construction was complete. The Sears Tower was the tallest building in the world, and it would hold that title for nearly 25 years, until the Petronas Twin Towers in Kuala Lumpur surpassed it in 1996. The numbers are staggering. 110 stories, 1,451 feet tall, or 1,729 feet, including the broadcast antennas. 16,100 windows, 40,000 sprinkler heads, an average daily sway of 6 inches in any direction, and a design tolerance of up to 3 feet. On clear days, from the sky deck on the 103rd floor, you can see 4 states: Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. About 7 million people visit the sky deck every year. But here is one of the most remarkable footnotes of the building's story. Sears moved out in 1988. They sold the building. And yet the name stayed. For another 21 years, the world's most famous skyscraper still bore the name of a company that no longer occupied it, a testament to how completely the building had become Chicago itself. In 2009, The London-based insurance firm Willis Group leased 3 floors and secured the naming rights. The building officially became Willis Tower on July 16, 2009. Most Chicagoans still call it the Sears Tower, the city that always comes back. What do all of these landmarks have in common? None of them were easy. None of them went according to plan. The Great Fire destroyed everything and gave birth to a new city. The Art Institute burned and rebuilt. Navy Pier went from military training ground to ghost pier to global destination. The Bean was declared unbuildable and then became one of the most beloved sculptures on Earth. The Sears Tower was built for a company that would later abandon it, and the building became more famous than the company ever was. Chicago's name itself comes from a Native American word, most likely from the Miami, Illinois language, describing the wild leeks and onions that once grew along the riverbanks here. The first Europeans to pass through were French explorers Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet in 1673. By 1871, it was a city of 300,000. By 1893, it was hosting a World's Fair that drew 27 million visitors. By 1973, it had the tallest building on Earth. Chicago is not a city that was handed its greatness. It is a city that insisted on it. Burned down? Rebuild taller? Called impossible? Do it anyway. Mocked for your giant bean? Polish it twice a day until everyone falls in love with it. That is Chicago. And every landmark in this city tells you exactly who these people are. Thanks for watching. And if you've never stood under the arch of the Bean at sunset, watching the skyline curve and multiply around you while the lake glitters in the background, put it on your list. It's worth every mile.